Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Hollywood Remembers video. Today we're going to pay a heartfelt tribute to the American stars we've recently lost, as well as other beloved figures around the world who have touched our lives. Before we begin, if this content resonates with you, please leave a like. It helps the channel continue bringing you tributes made with respect and care. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin.
Ken Peplowski was an American jazz clarinetist and tenor saxophonist, best known for his deep connection to swing music. He was born on May 23, 1959, in Cleveland, Ohio, and spent his life devoted to the sound, the feel, and the spirit of jazz. Ken Peplowski passed away on February 2, 2026. For many listeners, his sound was instantly recognizable, warm, clear, unrushed. It felt conversational, almost personal, as if he were speaking directly to you through his instrument. Ken never played to impress, he played to connect, and that made all the difference. Swing was at the heart of everything he did, not as a style, but as a way of breathing through music. Over more than a decade, he recorded extensively for Concord Records, building a body of work that honored the jazz tradition while keeping it alive and relevant. He believed that this music still mattered, and every note he played backed that up. Coming from Cleveland, a working-class city with grit and soul, Ken carried that grounded sensibility wherever he went. Fellow musicians often spoke about his generosity, his respect for the music, and the way he listened just as carefully as he played. He understood that jazz was never about one person. It was about shared time, shared space, shared feeling. Ken Peplowski didn't shout through his horn. He invited you in. And now, while his absence is deeply felt, the music remains, the swing remains, and through it, so does his voice. Charles Negron II was an American singer and songwriter, best known as a founding member and the lead vocalist of the rock band Three Dog Night. He was born on June 8, 1942 in Manhattan, New York, and his voice became part of the soundtrack of a whole era. Charles Negron II passed away on February 2, 2026. For so many people, Three Dog Night wasn't just a band you listened to. It was a band you lived with. The songs were on the radio, in the car, in the kitchen, playing at parties, playing late at night when the house finally got quiet. And at the center of that sound was Chuck's voice, strong, emotional, and unmistakably human. He had that rare gift where a lyric didn't feel like it was being performed, it felt like it was being told, like someone was letting you in on something real. That's why people kept coming back, year after year, not just for the hits, but for the feeling those songs carried. Coming from Manhattan, he found his way into a band that could light up a room and still reach someone sitting alone with a small radio turned down low. That's impact. That's connection. That's what great singers do. Now he's gone, and that's hard to take in, but what remains is the sound, the records, the memories attached to them, and that voice, still there, still alive in the music, whenever someone presses play.
Gerardo Taracena films like Apocalypto, Man on Fire, The Violin, and Sin Nombre. These were not easy stories, and Gerardo was not an easy presence to forget. He brought intensity without exaggeration, pain without spectacle, strength without noise. Before the screen, there was the stage. As a trained dancer and theater actor, he understood the body as much as the voice. Every movement mattered. Every pause carried weight. That discipline followed him into film, where even silence could feel loud when he was on screen. Later, a new generation came to know him through the Netflix series Narcos, Mexico. Once again, he brought honesty to a world full of conflict, showing the cost carried by real people behind the headlines. Gerardo Taracena never chased comfort in his roles. He chose truth. And that truth stayed with audiences long after the scene ended. Now he's gone, far too soon, but his work remains. In the films, on the stage, and in the quiet moments when a performance reminds us what it means to be human.
Lee Ann Womack is more than a country singer with a flawless, aching tone. Her story isn't really about hit records or awards. It's about learning how to stand still inside uncertainty and deciding who you are when applause fades faster than memory. She grew up surrounded by sound but not comfort. Music was present early, almost unavoidable, yet stability was not guaranteed in the same way. From a young age, Lee Ann learned that harmony on stage did not always reflect harmony at home. That contrast mattered more than any melody she would later sing. Her father worked as a disc jockey, a figure of authority who understood audiences and timing but also rules. He expected discipline, precision and respect for tradition. Music to him was a craft with standards. You earned your place, or you didn't. There was little room for indulgence or softness in that worldview. Her mother represented something different. She offered emotional shelter, a quieter strength that didn't demand perfection. Where one parent pushed, the other steadied. Lee Ann grew between those two forces, learning early that approval and safety did not always come from the same place. That tension shaped her instincts. She didn't chase attention loudly. She learned instead how to listen, how to absorb a room, how to wait. Singing became less about showing off, and more about communicating something she didn't yet have words for. Her voice carried restraint before it carried confidence. By her teenage years, it was clear she had talent. But talent alone never explains staying power. What separated her was control. She understood phrasing, silence, and emotional timing in a way that couldn't be taught easily. It felt less like performance and more like translation, turning complicated feelings into something orderly. College and early professional years reinforced that discipline. She studied music seriously, surrounded by people just as ambitious and technically capable. Success didn't arrive instantly, but she didn't rush it. There was patience in her approach, a belief that being ready mattered more than being first. Long before fame arrived, Lee Ann Womack learned how to exist inside pressure without breaking. That skill would matter later, when expectations grew heavier than ambition, and when success demanded more than just a beautiful voice. Her foundation was not built on hype. It was built on restraint. When Lee Ann Womack finally began to break through, it wasn't sudden and it wasn't loud. Her rise felt almost polite by industry standards. Country music in the 1990s was full of big personalities and bigger gestures, but she moved differently. She didn't rush to redefine the genre. She stepped carefully into it. Her early recordings showed promise without spectacle. Critics noticed the clarity of her voice, the way it carried emotion without forcing it forward. Producers saw reliability. Radio programmers heard something familiar but sincere. She didn't sound trendy, and that was the point. She sounded grounded. The first real taste of success brought a delicate reward: visibility. Songs began charting. Her name started appearing regularly on playlists and award ballots. With each step forward, the industry asked a quiet question: could she last? Not because she lacked talent, but because she refused to play loud. Then came the moment that changed everything. I Hope You Dance wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural pause. The song didn't chase youth or rebellion. It spoke directly to reflection, to time passing, to values handed down rather than replaced. It resonated across generations in a way few songs ever do. The success was immense. Awards followed. Recognition expanded beyond the country audience. Suddenly, Lee Ann Womack was not just respected, she was emblematic. Her voice became associated with grace, sincerity, and emotional clarity. That kind of image is powerful. It's also dangerous. With success came expectations that narrowed rather than expanded. People wanted her to remain exactly as she appeared in that moment: warm, safe, inspirational. The industry tends to reward consistency, but it punishes deviation even faster. Growth becomes a risk. Behind the scenes, pressure replaced momentum. Each new project was measured not by artistic intent, but by how closely it mirrored past success. The room for exploration grew smaller, and while fame amplified her voice, it also boxed it in. Financially and professionally, things looked stable. Emotionally, the cost was harder to see. When an artist becomes a symbol, it becomes difficult to remain a person. Lee Ann carried responsibility not just for herself, but for an image that no longer belonged solely to her. The song that made her household famous had given her everything. It had also quietly set the ceiling. Success had arrived, but freedom had not. After peak success, Lee Ann Womack entered a phase few audiences notice while it's happening. From the outside, her career looked steady. She was still respected, still invited, still praised for the same qualities that had always defined her. But internally, the ground had shifted. Country music was changing. The genre leaned louder, younger, and more image-driven. Songs became broader, production heavier, narratives simpler. Lee Ann's strength had always been nuance, but nuance doesn't always compete well in moments of acceleration. She wasn't rejected, she was gently sidelined. The industry didn't say no outright. It suggested adjustments, a different sound, a safer choice, something that fit the moment. But those moments kept passing faster. Each decision carried an invisible cost, compromise or quiet. She chose quiet more often than compromise. That choice had consequences. Releases arrived with less noise, promotions softened, airplay thinned. None of it felt dramatic enough to protest, which made it harder to explain. There was no scandal, no collapse, just a gradual reduction of space. Personally, life carried its own weight. Balancing identity as an artist, a mother, and a public figure required constant negotiation. Fame had given her reach, but not immunity. Emotional fatigue doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles in slowly, especially for people used to holding themselves together. What made this period especially isolating was the mismatch between perception and reality. To fans, she was still successful, still admired, still fortunate. Gratitude became expected. Admitting uncertainty felt almost ungrateful, even to herself. Yet something important happened during this quiet stretch. Freed from chasing charts, she began reassessing what mattered most. Not relevance, not numbers, but integrity. She revisited influences, sounds that predated trends, and stories that didn't fit radio formulas. She wasn't disappearing. She was repositioning. That internal work rarely looks productive from the outside. It doesn't generate headlines, it doesn't reassure executives, but it builds something sturdier than momentum. Lee Ann Womack was learning how to exist without constant validation. That lesson is uncomfortable, especially for someone whose voice once carried collective expectations. Silence forces honesty, and honesty requires patience. The industry moved on quickly, as it always does. She did not chase it. Instead, she stayed, listening, recalibrating. Not every pause is a retreat. Some are preparation. The return, when it came, didn't look like a comeback. There were no grand announcements or attempts to reclaim former peaks. Instead, Lee Ann Womack stepped forward with intention, choosing substance over positioning. The question was no longer how to be visible again, but how to be honest. Her later work reflected that shift. The production leaned quieter, the songwriting more deliberate. She embraced material that asked more from the listener, not less. These records weren't designed for mass rotation. They were built for people willing to stay. One of the most telling changes was her relationship with control. Earlier in her career, discipline had meant meeting expectations. Now it meant protecting boundaries. She allowed herself to make choices without defending them publicly. That restraint wasn't withdrawal. It was clarity. Critics who paid attention noticed the difference. The voice was still there, but it carried something new. Weight without strain. Experience without bitterness. She no longer sang as someone proving her place. She sang as someone who understood it. Legacy, in this context, became something quieter than trophies. It lived in influence, in how younger artists spoke about phrasing, storytelling, and emotional honesty. It lived in listeners who returned not for nostalgia, but for resonance. Public attention eventually circled back in smaller, more respectful ways. Interviews focused less on chart positions and more on perspective. She spoke not as a symbol of success or decline, but as a person who had moved through both without losing herself. The arc had completed itself. Talent became fame, fame became pressure, pressure became perspective. What remained was not a brand, but a human voice that had learned when to sing and when to be silent. Lee Ann Womack's story doesn't end with reinvention or revival. It settles into something more durable: acceptance, presence, a life shaped by music, but not owned by it. The greatest measure of her career was never visibility, it was alignment. And for an artist whose voice once carried an entire generation's hopes, becoming whole may be the rarest achievement of all.